UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is currently taking questions in the House of Commons. The Prime Minister had, remember, confirmed that England's COVID-19 rules will be lifted on the 19th of July. Let's cut straight across to the UK House of Commons.
Both my right honourable friend the Chancellor had to say from this dispatch box, and what I said as well. We want to return to point 7 as fast as we can when fiscal conditions allow.
We now come to Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I start by thanking the England football team for everything they've given this country over the last 6 weeks. I'm so proud of this young, diverse and humble team and everything that it represents. Mr. Speaker, they're the very best of modern Britain, everything that I know this country can be. Does the Prime Minister think that it was wrong to criticise the England team's decision to oppose racism by taking the knee as gesture politics?
I agree very much with what the right honourable gentleman said about the England team. And I repeat, I want to thank each and every one of them for what they did, their incredible campaign they ran in the Euro 2020 Championships. And they do represent the very best of our country. And I repeat that I utterly condemn and abhor the racist outpourings that we saw on Sunday night. And so what we're doing is today taking practical steps to ensure that the football banning order regime is changed, so that if you are guilty, Mr. Speaker, of racist abuse online of footballers, then you will not be going to the match. No ifs, no buts, no exemptions and no excuses.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry, that just won't wash. And it rings hollow. On the 7th, remind the Prime Minister in the House, on the 7th of June, the Prime Minister's spokesperson said this: on taking the knee, specifically, the Prime Minister is more focused on actions rather than gestures. On the 14th of June, the Home Secretary said, I just don't support people participating in that type of gesture politics. The Conservative MP for Bassetlaw called it a ridiculous, empty gesture. So there's no point of pretending that these things weren't said. The England footballer, Tyrone Mings, said that Labour Party member I hear shouted out. Is that really the response? Is that it? Tyrone Mings said, and the House might want to listen, he said this: labelling anti-racism messages as gesture politics serve to stoke the fire of racism and hatred. Prime Minister, they're powerful words from someone who has himself been subjected to racist abuse. He's right, isn't he?
Mr. Speaker, I want to reiterate our total support for our fantastic England team, and I support them in the way that they show solidarity with their friends who face racism, Mr. Speaker. But when he talks about the Home Secretary, let me just remind him that my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, has faced racism and prejudice all her career of a kind that he can never imagine, and she has taken practical steps to get black and minority officers into the police in record numbers. In fact, Prime Speaker, I am very proud.
Sorry to interrupt you. I want to hear the Prime Minister. If his own side don't want to hear him, I'm sure the tea room will accommodate them. It's very important to listen to what the Prime Minister's got to say. Have you finished, Prime Minister? Are you OK? Yeah. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. I totally condemn all racism, including that directed at the Home Secretary. But she's got this wrong. The whole country knows it. His own MPs know it. In the last few days, everybody has seen England's black players have been the targets of disgusting racist abuse following Sunday's match. Disgusting. And this is really simple, Mr. Speaker. Either the Prime Minister is with the England players in their stand against racism, or he can defend his own record, those of his ministers and some of his MPs. But he can't have it both ways. So can he tell the House, does he now regret failing to condemn those who booed England players for standing up to racism, yes or no?
Mr. Speaker, we made it absolutely clear that no one should boo the England team. And Mr. Speaker, what we're doing now is following the following the racist abuse that our players sadly suffered on Sunday night and thereafter, we're taking practical action. So in addition to changing the football banning order regime, last night I met representatives of Facebook, of Twitter, of TikTok, of Snapchat, of Instagram, and I made it absolutely clear to them that we will legislate to address this problem, Mr. Speaker, in the online harms bill, and unless they get hate and racism off their platforms, they will face fines amounting to 10% of their global revenues, and we all know, Mr. Speaker, that they have the technology to do it.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the online harms bill has been promised for 3 years. I'm not sure a 15-minute chat at a garden party moves things forward that significantly. But I want to take the Prime Minister up on what he said about being absolutely clear, because here I have the headline, Mr. Speaker: Boris Johnson refuses to condemn fans booing England taking the knee. That's the story, that's the headline, June the 6th. Boris Johnson refuses to condemn fans booing England taking the knee. That's absolutely clear. It's not quite what the Prime Minister is implying today. It goes on to quote the Prime Minister's spokesperson, saying that the Prime Minister fully respects the rights of those who choose to make their feelings known. This is about booing. Fully respects their rights. And the Home Secretary said that booing was a choice for them, quite frankly. So no condemnation there, no absolute clarity there, Mr. Speaker. When senior government ministers and Conservative MPs defend the booing of an anti-racist message, who do they think they're defending, Prime Minister, and why are they defending it?
Mr. Speaker, nobody defends booing of the England side. Nobody defends booing of the England side. And if he continues to attack the Home Secretary...
Prime Minister, just... Look, I want to hear the Prime Minister. I want to know the answer, and I expect the opposition to listen to the answer. Prime Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. We love and admire the England side and what they did. They represent the best of our country. Nobody defends booing the England side, Mr. Speaker. But what the Home Secretary has been trying to do all her life is not just to fight racism, but to take practical steps to advance the cause of black and minority ethnic groups, which he has done successfully, notably in the police. And since, Mr. Speaker, he's chucking this kind of thing around, could I ask him now to retract this leaflet produced by the Labour Party during the Batley and Spen by-election, which was condemned by his own MPs as dog whistle racism, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister isn't kidding anyone in this House. He's not kidding the public, and he's not even kidding his own MPs. Let me quote the Conservative MP for Plymouth Moor View. Conservative MP: the painful truth, says the Conservative MP for Plymouth Moor View, is that Tyrone Mings is completely right. I am very uncomfortable, he says, with the position we Conservatives are needlessly forcing ourselves into. So, Prime Minister, behind you they don't believe you, and neither do we. Mr. Speaker, we can all see what's happened here. The government has been trying to stoke a culture war, and they've realised they're on the wrong side. And now they hope that nobody's noticed. Why else would a Conservative MP boast that he's not watching his own team? Why else would another Conservative MP say that Marcus Rashford spends too much time playing politics when he's actually trying to feed children that the government won't? And why will the Prime Minister refuse time and time again, even now, to condemn those who boo our players for standing up against racism? Mr. Speaker, what is it that this England team symbolises that this Conservative Party is so afraid of?
Mr. Speaker, I think the House will judge for themselves the quality of the question that the Right Honourable Gentleman has just put. I think the whole House is united, including our distinguished members from Scotland, by the way, Mr. Speaker, in admiration of the England team and of every single member of that squad and what they did. And we stick up for them, Mr. Speaker. And what we're doing is taking practical steps to fight racism changing the football banning order regime, fining the online companies, and, by the way, we will use more legislation if we have to, just as we use the threat of legislation, Mr. Speaker, to stop the European Super League. And we will get on. We will get on with delivering for the people of this country. We will get on with vaccinating the people of this country while they continue to vacillate. We will continue to immunise the people of this country while they improvise and dart around. And, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to engage in a political culture war of any kind. I want to get on with delivering for the people of this country. He simply wants to get on with dithering.
Keir Starmer.
He doesn't want to engage in a culture war and point scoring. Give me a break. Football's a game. Racism isn't, Prime Minister. That's why many of us have been involved in the charity Show Racism the Red Card for years. But far from giving racism the red card, the Prime Minister gave it the green light. And I'll tell you the worst kind of gesture politics, Mr. Speaker. Putting an England shirt on over a shirt and tie whilst not condemning those booing is the worst kind of gesture. Mr. Speaker, I want to ask the Prime Minister, finally, about the reported amnesty for crimes committed during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. I worked in Northern Ireland for 6 years with the Policing Board and the police. I've also prosecuted terrorists as the Director of Public Prosecutions, so I know how difficult and how sensitive this is. But a blanket amnesty, including for terrorists, is plain wrong. I was in Northern Ireland last week, and it's absolutely clear that the government's amnesty is not supported by the political parties in Northern Ireland, and it's not supported by victims groups. Last Thursday, I spoke to victims of terrorism at the Wave Trauma Centre in North Belfast. Mr. Speaker, they haven't even been properly consulted on this proposal. If things are to move forward in Northern Ireland, any discussion has to start with the victims. Politicians in London can't simply draw a line under terrorism and other crimes and then force it on those most affected. The Prime Minister looks up, so let him look up and let him hear. I want to quote Julie Hambleton, Mr. Prime Minister.
The Labour leader, Keir Starmer, grilling UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson specifically on the Northern Ireland issue. Talking about the issue of racism, the Prime Minister witnessing that verbal showdown with the opposition leader. Remember, the controversy following the Euro 2020 final has put the spotlight on the issue of racism. Let's listen in to what the UK Prime Minister is saying on the matter.
Of course, nothing I say or can do now can in any way mitigate her loss, and that is clear. But it is also true that the people of Northern Ireland must, if we possibly can allow them to, they must move forwards now. And he will know that the proposals that are being brought forward, and the House will hear about them in more detail later on from my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. The proposals that are being brought forward are measured, they are balanced, and they have a wide degree of support, I may say, from former Labour Prime Ministers and former Labour leaders who I think are of considerable more distinction, I may say, than the right honourable gentleman opposite. And he will recall that it was under that Labour administration that many terrorists were unfortunately given effectively an amnesty, and they were allowed to escape the full consequences of their crimes, as he knows very well, and that is the reality. Whilst the sad fact remains that, and this is of course no consolation to people like Julie, but the sad fact remains that there are many members of the armed services who continue to face the threat of vexatious prosecutions well into their 70s and 80s and later. And we are finally, Mr. Speaker, bringing forward a solution to this problem, to enable the province of Northern Ireland to draw a line under the Troubles, to enable the people of Northern Ireland to move forward. And I think someone with greater statesmanship and clarity of vision would have seen that, Mr. Speaker, and given these proposals a fair wind.
Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the scandalous situation at Wally's Quarry landfill in my constituency with the noxious gas emissions is, I'm afraid, continuing. To date, there's been no apology from the operator, Red Industries, and no credible explanation for the odour that is blighting the lives and the health of so many of my residents. So what assurances can the Prime Minister give me today that every effort will be made to speed up the works that have been mandated by the Environment Agency, that we will get a deadline as to when we can expect this awful situation to be resolved, and that those responsible are held fully to account?
Stop this thing. Mr. Speaker, I yield to no one in my admiration for the Environment Agency, but in this case, Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable friend because they are not, in my view, sorting this problem out fast enough. I am fed up with this being raised with me. We must stop the stink, and I want the air around Wally's Quarry to be of alpine freshness before too long.
Ian Blackford, the SNP leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me begin by congratulating the England team for reaching the final, an incredible achievement. But the tragedy of the tournament was the undercurrent of racism that was ultimately targeted at 3 young men, Rashford, Sancho and Saka. Mr. Speaker, wherever there is racism, it falls on all of us to face it down and to call it out. And it is shameful that it took until last night for the Prime Minister to meet with the main social media companies and finally wake up to the fact that those who publish and promote vile, racist online abuse need to be faced down and sanctioned. So, can the Prime Minister tell us what sanctions he thinks would be appropriate for someone who publishes racist content? And it is shocking even to have to say this out loud. Describing Africans as flag-waving piccaninnies with watermelon smiles.
Shameful. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I've commented many times about the words that I've said in the past, and I think the House understands how. And I think the House understands how you can take things out of context, Mr. Speaker. I think people do understand that, but what they also understand is that there is a chance now to hold these internet companies to account and to make sure that they face fines running to 10% of their global income if they fail to take hate and racism off their platforms, Mr. Speaker. And I hope, actually, that the Scottish Nationalist Party will support it.
Ian Blackford.
You know, still no contrition, still no apology. And, Mr. Speaker, the truth is that the Tory party doesn't sanction those who publish that kind of racist content. They promote them to be Prime Minister. The legacy of this Prime Minister's dog whistling has followed him into 10 Downing Street, and it is now at the heart of this Tory government. As the England International Tyrone Mings has so powerfully stated, this government doesn't get to stoke the fires of racism and pretend to be disgusted when it happens. They don't get to condemn the racism of others, but deny that the racism that they have even provoked. In March, this UK government's own report on racism, the Sewell report, said that there was no systemic problem in the UK. I think the England men's football team would beg to differ. After the shocking racism on show over the last week, does the Prime Minister still stand by his government's belief that systemic racism is not a problem that exists in the United Kingdom?
Mr. Speaker, I do think that racism is a problem in the United Kingdom, and I believe it needs to be tackled and it needs to be stamped out with some of the means that I've described this morning. But when he attacks our party, my party, Mr. Speaker, I'm afraid he's got the wrong target. This is a party that has not only had the first ever Muslim Secretary of State for Health, now he was former Chancellor, of course, but has had 2 female Prime Ministers, the most diverse cabinet in the history of this country, the most diverse government in the history of this this country, Mr. Speaker. We are the party. If you are a young person growing up in a black or ethnic minority group in this country, we are the party that represent hope and opportunity. That is the reality about the Conservative Party today.
Julie Marston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The UK is packed full of incredible innovation-led businesses capable of leading entire industries, not least in Hertford and Stortford, where we are at the heart of the innovation corridor. I know this government wants to ensure the best possible access to venture funding over multiple rounds to catapult scale-up businesses full of potential into world-beating companies. Would the Prime Minister meet with me to discuss how we can best make venture work for the scale-up community and transform some of our best ideas into some of the world's biggest businesses?
I thank the honourable lady, and she knows a lot about what the subject that she mentions. This is a fantastic opportunity for this country because we do indeed produce a great many tech breakthroughs, and we're looking very much at how to make sure that we scale up fast. But don't let her forget that as I speak, there are 3 countries in the world, Mr. Speaker, that have scaled up tech breakthroughs to unicorns worth more than £1 billion, 100 unicorns worth more than £1 billion. Only 3 countries have 100 unicorns. They are the United States of America, China and the United Kingdom.
For over 7 years, Plaid Cymru has been calling for the gargantuan HS2 railway to be treated as an England-only project so that Wales gets our fair share. Not a single inch of track will be in Wales, but we're footing the bill. Today, the Welsh Affairs Committee backed our call, calling the UK Government's categorisation of HS2 in relation to Wales as unfair and biased. Will the Prime Minister today right this wrong, respect the Welsh Affairs Select Committee and ensure that Wales, like Scotland, receives our fair share from HS2?
I normally have a great deal of respect and interest in what the honourable lady says, but actually in this case she's missed what the government is doing for transport connectivity in Wales and to Wales, something about which I know that she's as passionate as I am. Look at what we're doing in the Union Connectivity Review with the A55, with the North Wales Railway corridor into Liverpool, and look at the M4, Mr. Speaker. Never let it be forgotten that it was the Welsh Labour government, not her fault, of course, because she's plied, but it was the Welsh Labour government, Mr. Speaker, that spent £144 million on a study, and then didn't even do the diversion.
WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.